The church bells echoed over the bay that afternoon, sharp and bright, like they were announcing my happily ever after. 300 guests sat in the pews, cameras ready, faces glowing with anticipation. Sunlight filtered through the stained glass, painting the aisle in fractured rainbows. My name is Maeve Ellison. I'm 63 years old, a retired aerospace engineer, and a widow for 15 years. I spent my life designing engines that could withstand fire, speed, and pressure, but nothing prepared me for this moment. Standing at the altar in ivory silk, staring into the eyes of the man I thought was my second chance at love. Father O'Connor's voice carried through the chapel. "Do you, Maeve, take Adrian Cross to be your lawfully wedded husband?" I felt 300 pairs of eyes drilling into me. My son Theo, pale in his tuxedo. My daughter-in-law Piper, radiant in her burgundy dress in the second row. And Adrian, so perfectly composed, so sure of himself, waiting for me to say yes. But instead, I reached out, took the microphone from the priest, and said, "Before I answer that, there's something everyone here needs to know." The room froze. Guests leaned forward. A few gasped. Adrian's confident smile faltered for the first time since I'd met him. I lifted my phone high, its screen glowing with the messages that had shattered every illusion I once believed in. My voice didn't tremble. It cut through the chapel like a blade. "This isn't a wedding," I told them. "This is a reckoning." 6 months earlier, I wasn't standing in a chapel. I was standing in front of a canvas at the Meridian Art Gallery, squinting at a Jackson Pollock print that looked like someone had sneezed paint across a wall. I remember muttering under my breath, "This looks like my kitchen after spaghetti night." That's when I heard a man's voice behind me. Smooth, warm, like whiskey aged just right. "Excuse me, but you clearly have exquisite taste." I turned and saw him, silver hair, tailored suit, late 50s, but carried himself like a man who'd always owned the room. His eyes caught the light, golden brown and unflinching. "Well, that's debatable," I said dryly. "Because frankly, this looks like the aftermath of my blender exploding." He laughed, not a polite chuckle. A real, full-bodied laugh that made people turn their heads. "I like that," he said, offering his hand. "Adrian Cross." I shook it. "Maeve Ellison." We ended up walking through the gallery together, talking about art, about grief, about the strange ways life insists on moving forward after it knocks you flat. Adrian told me he was a widower, too. No kids, just a man trying to find meaning after his wife's battle with cancer. "The hardest part isn't losing them," he said softly as we stood under a skylight. "It's waking up to silence, realizing you have to live for yourself again." I felt my throat tighten. He had put into words the exact ache I carried, and for the first time in years I felt seen. When he asked if I'd like to get coffee sometime, my better judgment whispered say no, but my loneliness whispered louder. I said yes. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into late-night phone calls. Within weeks, Adrian was a fixture in my life. He brought flowers to my doorstep, cooked omelets in my kitchen while humming Sinatra, drove me to the farmer's market on Saturdays, and carried my bags like a man 20 years younger. "You make me feel alive again, Maeve," he'd whisper, his hand resting against mine as the kettle whistled. Like I finally have a reason to smile. I wasn't used to being adored. After Robert died, I had learned to live small, work, garden, books, quiet evenings with tea. But Adrian lit up the rooms again. He told me I was beautiful, brilliant, deserving of joy. He told me things I had stopped believing. One evening in my lavender garden, the one Robert planted for our 20th anniversary, Adrian dropped to one knee. A velvet box in his hand, a diamond glinting in the dusk. "Maeve," he said, his voice thick with conviction, "we don't have forever. At our age, why waste time? I want to spend whatever years I have left making you happy." The ring was perfect. The moment was perfect. He was perfect. And I, God help me, said yes. We planned the wedding together, or at least he convinced me to plan the kind of wedding I'd never dared dream of. Nothing small, darling, you deserve the works. A church by the bay, a reception under chandeliers, a band that keeps everyone dancing until midnight. I hesitated. Adrian, that's expensive. He kissed my hand. And worth every penny. Let me handle it. Let me spoil you. Every fairy tale has its prince, but as I stood there in my garden, with Adrian's diamond flashing on my finger, I didn't realize mine was wearing wolf's clothing. The Sunday after Adrian proposed, I decided it was time. I'd raised my son Theo to be protective, a good man, an engineer like his father. He'd been through his own storms, married young, too young maybe, to Piper Vale, a woman with charm sharp enough to cut glass. I wasn't blind, Piper never warmed to me, but for Theo's sake I tolerated her. So when I called him that morning and said, "Theo, I'd like you and Piper to come for dinner tonight. I have news," his voice jumped a full octave. "Mom, you're getting married. That's incredible, we'll be there." By 6, the lavender garden was glowing in the dusk, my table set with roasted chicken and Robert's old wine glasses polished until they gleamed. Adrian arrived first, bearing a bottle of Bordeaux and that perfect smile. He kissed my cheek like we were already husband and wife. Then Theo and Piper walked in. She wore a deep burgundy dress that clung like she was stepping onto a stage instead of into my dining room. She brought flowers, but the way her eyes darted to Adrian before greeting me made something sharp stir in my chest. Dinner started well enough. Adrian poured wine, told stories about his investment consulting work, charmed Theo with talk of portfolios and market strategy. Theo leaned back, impressed. "That's impressive. Mom, you'll be in good hands." I bristled. "I've managed my finances perfectly fine for 15 years, thank you." Adrian's hand slid over mine, soft but firm. "Of course you have, sweetheart, but wouldn't it be nice to have professional help?" Sweetheart. The word rang wrong in front of my son. Piper's eyes sparkled, her fork pausing mid-cut of steak. "Margaret definitely needs someone looking out for her. It's a blessing, really." I gripped my serving spoon tighter. A blessing, as if I were some fragile, aging fool who couldn't balance a checkbook. But what unsettled me most were the glances. The way Piper laughed just a fraction too long at Adrian's jokes. The way Adrian passed her the salt, fingers brushing hers, lingering a second too long. The way her cheeks flushed when he complimented the wine like the words were meant for her, not me. Theo, oblivious, raised his glass. To new beginnings and second chances. We toasted, but my smile felt tight. Something in the room was off-key, like a violin string pulled just a hair too far. After dinner, Theo helped clear plates. Piper lingered in the living room, flipping through one of my wedding magazines, her voice light but probing. "So, Maeve, when's the big day?" she asked, eyes flicking toward Adrian. "October 15th, I answered, wiping my hands on a towel. "Simple, small." "Nonsense," Adrian interrupted smoothly, placing his arm around me. "Maeve deserves a grand celebration, big church, flowers everywhere. A woman like her should be celebrated." Piper's smile sharpened. "Oh, I agree, every queen deserves her crown." Something in her tone made the hair on my arms prickle. When Theo and Piper finally left, Adrian stayed behind, helping me with dishes. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, his lips brushing my temple. "Your family is wonderful," he murmured. I kept my eyes on the soapy water. "Theo is Piper, she's protective, sometimes a little too protective." Adrian chuckled. Nothing wrong with looking out for family. But his phone buzzed on the counter, screen flashing with a message he snatched up too quickly. He smiled too smooth. "Client emergency, money never sleeps." I watched him walk away to answer the call, my chest tightening. Dinner was supposed to reassure me. Instead, it planted the first seed of dread. And deep down, I already knew. Lavender can hide the smell of rot, but only for so long. They say love makes you blind. I disagree. Love makes you want to close your eyes. It hands you red flags like roses and you pretend the thorns don't exist. But I couldn't keep pretending. It started with the phone calls. Adrian's phone would buzz at midnight, at dawn, during Sunday dinner. Always the same excuse. Clients get nervous after hours. Investment never sleeps. But no real client calls every single night. One Sunday morning, while my coffee steamed and his phone lay charging on the counter, a message slid across the screen. "Elle, missing you already." My heart stuttered. Who was Elle? When I asked him, Adrian didn't flinch. "Larry, my business partner. He gets sentimental after a few drinks." Larry, of course, because men in their 50s definitely text each other like high school sweethearts. I smiled tightly, but inside I filed it away. Then came the stories. One day he told me his late wife had died of cancer. Another time it was a car accident. Then suddenly she'd fallen hiking in Colorado. I asked casually, quite the adventurer, wasn't she? His eyes narrowed a fraction. "What do you mean?" "Well, last week you said it was cancer. Yesterday it was hiking. Which is it?" He chuckled, too smooth. "Different wives, sweetheart. I was married twice before. I told you that." No, he hadn't, and I knew it. But I let the silence stretch, let him think I swallowed the lie. Inside, another note was added to my mental file. Meanwhile, Piper's presence grew heavier. She started showing up unannounced. "Just checking if you need help with wedding plans," she'd say, sliding glossy magazines across my counter. But her questions weren't about flowers or dresses. They were about Adrian. "Where's your handsome fiancé today? Business trip again? Atlanta this time, or was it Tampa?" Her tone was too casual, her eyes too sharp. One evening, she arrived just as Adrian was leaving. Their eyes met across the hall, and for a split second, the air between them shifted. Her cheeks flushed pink. His smile was too knowing. "Evening, Piper," he said smoothly, tucking a folder under his arm. "Oh," she stammered. "Didn't know you were here. You two know each other?" I asked, watching like a hawk. "Just passing in the hallway," Adrian replied. But the way Piper watched him walk out to his car, her lips parted just slightly. God, my stomach turned. I tried to shake it off. Wedding stress, I told myself. Nerves. I was 63, not some naive teenager. Surely I wasn't imagining things. But then the final straw. My car had died in Adrian's driveway and my phone was upstairs dead. I grabbed his phone to call AAA. Before I could even dial, a notification popped up. "Elle, can't wait much longer." My hands went cold. I put the phone down just as Adrian came out with jumper cables. He kissed my cheek. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" I forced a smile. "Everything's fine." But inside I knew this wasn't just love, this was a script. And if I didn't open my eyes soon, I wasn't going to be the bride. I was going to be the mark. Suspicion is a poison. It seeps into your bones, into your sleep. For weeks, I lay awake beside Adrian, his even breathing filling the dark, while my mind replayed every glance, every lie, every message. Finally, I decided, enough. If Adrian was a wolf, then I would be the hunter. The first investigation. At 2 a.m, while Adrian slept, I sat in my kitchen with black coffee and my laptop. Adrian Cross, investment consultant. I typed. Nothing. No LinkedIn. No professional website, not even a business registration. For a man managing wealthy clients, he had the digital footprint of a ghost. But I'd been a librarian before I was an engineer. I knew how to dig, and I found him. Not Adrian Cross, but Aiden Crow in a 3-year-old Tampa Bay Times article. Headline, "Investment Advisor Vanishes After Fraud Allegations." The photo was unmistakable. Younger, cockier, but him, standing outside a courthouse. The article told of widows and retirees who'd lost everything. Forged investment accounts. Vanished millions. My blood went cold. "Son of a bitch," I whispered to the empty kitchen. The file grows. I dug deeper. Court records. Marriage licenses in Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, always to women over 60. Divorce filings that mentioned irreconcilable differences and financial disputes. A bankruptcy under another name, Martin Pierce. A restraining order from a woman in Savannah. I printed everything. By dawn, a neat stack of damning evidence sat on my table like a deck of cards. I stared at it, heart pounding. Adrian wasn't just a liar, he was a predator, a professional. But one thing bothered me more than anything, Piper. Was she just another victim, seduced by his manipulation, or was she helping him? The stakeout. That afternoon, I did something I never imagined at 63. I followed Piper. She left Theo's office at noon, going to the gym. Instead, she drove downtown straight to the Marriott. I parked across the street and waited. My heart hammered as I watched her stride through the revolving doors, pulling a hotel key card from her purse. 2 hours later, she came back down, hair mussed, lipstick gone. 5 minutes after that, Adrian walked out, adjusting his tie, his face smug. My heart didn't break, it calcified. The quiet mask. That night, Adrian came over with Thai takeout and flowers. He kissed me, set plates on the table, poured wine. "You seem quiet tonight," he observed, spooning curry into my bowl. "Just tired," I murmured. "Wedding planning is exhausting." He smiled, brushing my hand. 2 weeks and it'll all be worth it. Maui, just you and me." I smiled back, masking the storm inside me. But while he showered, I scrolled through his phone with shaking fingers. Passcode 1947. Predictable, men never change passwords, just recycle their birth years. What I found turned my stomach. Months of messages between Adrian and Elle. Piper, photos I didn't want to see, conversations about my finances, my schedule, even my medication. She goes to bed early, usually asleep by 10. Piper, perfect, gives us more time. Adrian and then the dagger. 2 more weeks and we're home free. The old woman trusts me completely. The old woman, that was me. The private war begins. I screenshotted everything, then deleted the traces of my snooping. When Adrian came out of the bathroom, towel around his shoulders, he found me sitting on the bed in my nightgown, smiling faintly. "Come here, beautiful," he said, sliding into bed. I let him hold me. I let him whisper lies about Maui sunsets and happily ever afters. I let him think he'd won. But inside, my decision was made. I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to quietly cancel a wedding and lick my wounds. No, I was going to let Adrian walk straight into his own trap. The morning of my wedding, I woke before dawn. Not with nerves, not with excitement, with clarity. The lavender bushes swayed outside my window, Robert's old gift to me, fragrant in the cool breeze. I brewed coffee, slipped into my robe, and stared at my reflection. Ivory silk gown hanging on the closet door, diamond ring glinting in the dim light. My phone buzzed with a message from Adrian. "Adrian, can't sleep. Too excited to marry you today. Me, see you at the altar, my love." I typed it, hit send, then deleted the entire thread, because this wasn't love, this was war, the calm before the storm. By noon, the house buzzed with activity. My hairdresser fussed over curls, makeup brushes painted hope onto my face. Guests began arriving at the church overlooking the bay, their laughter echoing like wedding bells. Theo came by in his tux, looking nervous. "Any last-minute jitters, Mom?" "None," I said truthfully. "I've never been more certain of anything." He smiled faintly. "Dad would be proud." I kissed his cheek. "Your father taught me to never back down from a challenge. Today's just another challenge." The procession. At 3:00 p.m., the organ began. The church doors opened. 300 guests turned as I stepped inside. Ivory silk shimmered under stained glass. Every step down the aisle was steady, deliberate. At the altar, Adrian stood tall in his designer tuxedo, smiling, confident, certain he'd already won. Piper sat in the second row in a red dress that screamed defiance, her phone clutched in her manicured hands. Father O'Connor's voice rose. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here to witness the union of Maeve Ellison and Adrian Cross. Trap springs." The vows proceeded smoothly. Adrian's voice was strong, steady. He slid the band on my finger, eyes locked on mine, his smile smug. Then came my turn. "Do you, Maeve, take Adrian?" I took the microphone. My hand didn't shake, my voice didn't waver. "Before I answer that question," I said, my words echoing across the vaulted ceiling, "there's something everyone here needs to know about my groom." Gasps rippled through the pews. Adrian's smile faltered. I lifted my phone. "Would you like me to read the messages between Adrian Cross and my daughter-in-law Piper Vale? Because I think our guests deserve the truth." Chaos erupted. Chairs scraped. Guests leaned forward. Phones whipped out to record. Piper shot to her feet, face draining of color. "She's lying." I scrolled and read aloud. "2 more weeks and we're home free. The old woman trusts me completely." Adrian lunged for my phone. Theo blocked him, fury blazing in his eyes. "And here," I added calmly, holding up papers my lawyer prepared, "is proof of a $50,000 transfer from our joint account to the Cayman Islands, along with forged documents giving Adrian full power over my assets." Gasps turned to shouts. Some guests booed, others clapped. Adrian's mask shattered. His face twisted, rage replacing charm. He bolted down the aisle, straight into the arms of waiting federal agents. "Adrian Cross, a.k.a. Aiden Crow, a.k.a. Martin Pierce, you're under arrest for wire fraud and conspiracy." The sound of handcuffs snapped through the air like applause. The fallout in the aisle. The church was pandemonium. Guests shouted. Reporters scribbled. Piper tried to run, but a group of men blocked her path. I raised the microphone again, voice firm. "This wasn't the wedding you expected, but it was exactly the wedding I planned." Half the church erupted into applause. Some even cheered. I stepped down from the altar, bouquet in one hand, dignity in the other. The wedding march played again, but this time it sounded less like romance and more like victory. The church emptied into chaos. Guests poured into the courtyard, buzzing like a shaken hive. Reporters who'd slipped inside snapped photos, their flashes ricocheting off the marble columns. Inside, Theo sat slumped in the front pew, his tux jacket hanging off one shoulder. His face looked pale, almost boyish again, like the first time he'd skinned his knee at 8 years old and didn't know how to process the pain. Piper sat 3 rows back, surrounded by whispers. Her mascara streaked like war paint, her hands trembling. I walked up the aisle toward my son. My heels clicked steadily, each step echoing louder than the organ had. "Mom!" His voice cracked. "Tell me this isn't real. Tell me Piper didn't." I laid a hand on his shoulder. "Theo, I wish I could, but you saw the messages yourself. You heard me read them." His jaw clenched, eyes glassy. 8 years, Mom, 8 years with her, and I was blind." "No," I said firmly. "You weren't blind, you were trusting, and trust is not a weakness, it's what predators exploit." The Piper confrontation. Piper rose then, shaky but defiant. "Theo, please, it wasn't like that. He tricked me too. He said it was harmless, that your mother had more money than she knew what to do with." Theo whipped around, fury flashing. "Harmless. You were planning to rob my mother on her wedding day." Her lower lip quivered. "I didn't mean." "You meant every word you texted," I cut in. My voice was sharp, controlled. "You gave him details about my bank accounts, about my medication schedule, about when I slept. You weren't a bystander, Piper, you were his accomplice." Gasps rippled through the few remaining guests. Piper's face flushed scarlet under the scrutiny. She broke down then, sinking into the pew, sobs racking her chest. But even through the tears, I could see it, not pure remorse, but fear. Fear of what came next. The aftermath. By evening, footage of the altar takedown had gone viral. Headlines bloomed across social media like wildfire. The widow who said no at the altar. Romance scammer exposed in front of 300 guests. Bride outs groom, FBI arrests him mid-wedding. My phone buzzed nonstop with calls from journalists, neighbors, even strangers thanking me for showing that predators could be beaten. But the house was silent. No music, no champagne, just the ticking of the kitchen clock and Theo sitting across from me at the table, his tie undone, his eyes hollow. "Mom," he whispered, "I don't even know who I married." I reached across, squeezing his hand. "Then start over. Build a life with someone who sees you, not someone who uses you." He nodded faintly, the weight of betrayal settling on him like a heavy coat he hadn't chosen. The private reflection. That night, I slipped out to the lavender garden, the same place Adrian had proposed, the same place Robert used to kneel and plant bulbs with dirt under his nails and love in his eyes. I closed mine and whispered, "I kept my promise, Robert. I didn't let them take what we built." The scent of lavender wrapped around me like armor. The fallout was brutal, yes. Theo was shattered. Piper's mask had cracked, and my own heart, though hardened, still carried bruises. But beneath it all was something stronger. Resolve. Because Adrian had underestimated the wrong widow, and Piper's story wasn't finished yet. By Monday morning, my wedding wasn't just ruined. It was everywhere. CNN, NBC, local stations looping the footage of me in my ivory gown, holding the microphone like a battle flag, reading out Adrian's betrayal while Piper's face drained of color. Headlines screamed across the screen. Widow turns the tables at the altar. Romance scam exposed mid-vows. The bride who fought back. Strangers on Facebook called me brave, savage, legendary. Hashtags trended. #widow warrior, #wedding day justice, #don't mess with Maeve. I'd wanted to end Adrian's game. Instead, I'd become the main character in a viral morality play. The journalists. My landline rang nonstop. One morning I picked up and a cheerful voice chirped, "Mrs. Ellison, this is Sarah Mitchell with the Phoenix Journal. Could we get a comment for tomorrow's front page?" Another line buzzed. "Good Morning America wants to fly you in for an interview." I wasn't used to attention. For years, I'd been invisible, a quiet widow in a quiet house. Now the world wanted me loud. Theo groaned when he saw my phone light up. "Mom, maybe ignore them." But something inside me whispered, "This isn't just your story anymore." So when Sarah asked if she could interview me for a feature on romance scams, I said yes. The interview. She sat across from me at my kitchen table, recorder running, notebook open. "Why did you expose him at the altar, Mrs. Ellison? You could have walked away quietly." I sipped my coffee steady. Because silence protects predators. If I ended it privately, he would have found another widow, another bank account. Public humiliation was the only weapon sharp enough to cut him down. She nodded, scribbling furiously. "What do you want other women to know? That love is not measured by how fast a man asks for your trust or your money. And if something feels wrong, it usually is." Her article ran the next day. The widow who fought back, how Maeve Ellison turned betrayal into a warning for us all. Within hours, my voicemail filled with women from across the country. "I think this is happening to me. Can you help? My sister lost her savings to a man just like Adrian. Thank you for speaking out." The first spark. At first, it was overwhelming. But as I listened, something shifted. This wasn't just about me. This was about a system of women being targeted, shamed, and silenced. That evening, I stood before my mirror, still in the ivory gown I hadn't been able to bring myself to put away. "You wanted a wedding, Adrian," I whispered to the empty room. "You gave me a platform instead. The national spotlight. Within a week, I was on live television. The studio lights were hot, the cameras merciless, but my voice was steady. Romance scams thrive in silence, I told millions watching. I refused to stay silent, and I refused to let any other woman feel alone in this fight. Applause filled the studio. Viewers flooded the network with messages. The host leaned forward. "Mrs. Ellison, what's next for you?" I smiled faintly. Justice feels good, but prevention feels better. That's what comes next. I left the studio that night not just as Maeve Ellison, widow in a ruined wedding dress. I left as something new, a symbol, a voice, a shield. And I knew the media storm hadn't destroyed me, it had forged me. The first call came on a Tuesday night. I was folding laundry when my voicemail buzzed with a voice trembling on the edge of tears. "Mrs. Ellison, my name's Amanda. I saw your story online. I think the same thing's happening to me." He says he's a retired colonel, widowed, 2 kids in California. We've only been talking 3 months, and now he wants me to wire him $80,000 for an investment opportunity. I don't know what to do. I sat frozen, the shirt in my lap slipping through my fingers. Her voice sounded exactly like mine months ago, hopeful, lonely, desperate to believe. I called her back. "Amanda," I said gently, "you don't owe him a dime. You owe yourself protection. Cut contact. Block his number. Call your bank tomorrow, and if he pushes, go straight to the police." There was silence, then a shaky breath. "Are you sure?" I closed my eyes. "I'm sure, and you'll thank yourself later." 2 days later, she called again, her voice steadier. "I pulled back the transfer. You saved me." That was my first victory. The network is born. Calls kept coming. Emails flooded in. Women in Ohio, Arizona, Vermont, each one with a story. Each one on the edge of the same cliff I'd almost walked off. I couldn't handle it alone. So I called Patricia, one of Adrian's earlier victims I'd found during my research. She'd lost her retirement savings to him 3 years before. "Patricia," I said, "how would you feel about forming a group, not just for healing but for prevention?" She laughed bitterly. "You mean like a club for women who got played?" "No," I said firmly. "A shield, a network. We'll warn each other, we'll teach others, we'll fight back together." She was quiet. "Then, count me in." That weekend, 6 women sat in my living room, coffee mugs steaming, eyes sharp with anger and solidarity. We gave ourselves a name, the Aegis Widows Network. Aegis, the shield of Athena, protection, not passivity. The first save. Our first test came within a week. Dorothy, 70 and newly widowed, walked into our meeting with shaking hands. "I think I'm being targeted." He says his name is Captain Thomas. He's been asking for my pension details. We showed her the identical scripts from our own experiences. We pulled up photos of Captain Thomas already flagged on scammer databases. Her face drained, then hardened. "So it's all a lie?" "Yes," I said. "But now you're free and he's exposed." That night, Dorothy cut off contact. Days later, she called, her voice brimming with relief. "You saved my entire pension." The room erupted in applause. We had our first real, documented save, Maeve's reflection. That night, I wrote in my journal under the lavender bush, "Justice feels good, but prevention feels better." I had walked into my wedding expecting love and ended up with humiliation, but out of that humiliation, I had built a weapon. And with it, we were starting to win. For a few weeks, it felt like we were unstoppable. The Aegis Widows Network grew from 6 women in my living room to dozens across 3 states. Each week, we tallied new saves, pensions untouched, wires canceled, lives protected. But predators don't surrender quietly. The lawyers move. It began with a letter. Thick cream envelope, embossed seal. Ellison vs. Cross, cease and desist. Adrian's lawyer claimed my defamatory statements at the altar had irreparably damaged his client's reputation and right to a fair trial. They threatened to sue me for slander if I didn't issue a public retraction. I laughed so hard, I nearly spilled my tea. He conned widows out of millions, and he wants to sue me for hurting his feelings. But my lawyer, Janet, wasn't laughing. "Maeve, don't underestimate him. Men like Adrian weaponize the law as easily as they weaponize charm." I folded the letter and tucked it under my lavender journal. Let him try. My truth isn't defamation. The trolls. Then came the online backlash. Anonymous accounts flooded our Facebook page. Gold digger widow making it up for attention. If she was dumb enough to fall for it, she deserves it. Fake, staged, FBI doesn't arrest people at weddings. Pizza deliveries I never ordered showed up at my door. My phone buzzed with prank calls at all hours. Once I found a brick in my mailbox wrapped with a note. "Shut up, widow." Theo begged me to stay with him. "Mom, this is dangerous. They're trying to scare you." I straightened my shoulders. Good. If they're scared enough to harass me, that means I'm hitting them where it hurts. The Piper problem, and then Piper. Released on bail, she went on local TV, eyeliner perfect, voice trembling. "I was manipulated," she told the cameras. "Adrian lied to me too. Maeve is cruel, painting me as a villain. I was just lonely. I made mistakes, but I never meant to hurt anyone." Some viewers believed her. A few even accused me of turning the community against a young woman trapped in an older widow's feud. Watching her crocodile tears on screen, I nearly threw my coffee mug. "She's rewriting the story," Patricia growled beside me. "No," I said, calmer than I felt. "She's just playing a new role, victim. But masks don't last forever." The turning point. One night, as I walked to my car after a meeting, a man leaned against the hood. Mid-40s, leather jacket, smirk sharp enough to cut glass. "You should quit while you're ahead, Mrs. Ellison." I froze. "And who might you be?" He leaned closer. "Someone who doesn't like their business interrupted. You keep running that little club of yours and you'll regret it." My hand tightened on my keys. "Tell Adrian he should have picked a quieter widow." Then I shoved past him and drove off, my heart hammering but my resolve harder than steel. That night in my journal I wrote, "They want me silenced. That means they're scared, and scared men make mistakes. Backlash wasn't a sign of defeat, it was proof of progress, and I wasn't going anywhere." It was raining the night she came back. Sheets of water hammered against my windows, the lavender garden drowned in silver. I just closed my journal when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole I saw her, Piper. Drenched, trembling, mascara bleeding down her face. For a long moment I considered ignoring it. Let her stand in the storm the way she'd left me standing at that altar. But I opened the door. "Maeve, please." Her voice cracked. "I need to talk to you." The plea. She sank into my living room chair like a broken marionette, her hands twisting in her lap. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry for everything. I never meant for it to go this far." I folded my arms. "You shared my bank details with him. You tracked my schedule like I was a target, not family. How far did you think it was going to go?" Tears slid down her cheeks. "I thought Adrian loved me. He told me you were rich, that you'd never even notice the money. He said I was special, that he'd leave you for me." My laugh was bitter. "He's a con artist. He doesn't love anyone but himself. And you," I leaned closer, "you let him weaponize you against your own husband's mother." Her face crumpled. I know, but I can't sleep. I can't breathe. I want to make it right. Tell me what to do." The ultimatum. I studied her for a long moment. She was young, 35, but old enough to know better. Beautiful, yes. Manipulative, absolutely. But beneath the smeared makeup, I saw something I hadn't before, cracks. "You want to make it right?" I asked finally. She nodded desperately. "Anything." "Then testify, tell the FBI everything. How Adrian recruited you, what you gave him, every detail. Because if you don't, you're not just his accomplice, you're his partner in crime." Her lips trembled. "If I do, I'll lose everything, my marriage, my freedom, my life." "You already lost your marriage," I said coldly. "Freedom depends on your choices now, and life, well, that depends on whether you keep lying." The break. She sobbed, clutching her knees. "Theo will never forgive me." "That's between you and my son," I said flatly. "But forgiveness starts with truth, and right now the truth is the only thing that can keep you out of a federal prison for the next 20 years. Silence stretched, then she lifted her chin, wet hair plastered to her cheeks. "I'll do it," she whispered. "I'll testify." Maeve's reflection. When she left, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. I stood at the window, watching her taillights disappear into the dark. I didn't know if her tears were real remorse or just survival instinct. Maybe both, but I knew this. Adrian's empire of lies had begun to crack, and Piper Vale, whether from guilt or desperation, was about to help me finish the demolition. The courthouse smelled like old wood and older secrets. Theo sat stiff beside me, his jaw clenched, refusing to look at Piper across the aisle. She sat with her attorney, pale but polished, her hands twisting a tissue to shreds. And at the defense table, Adrian, tuxedo traded for an orange jumpsuit but still trying to wear the same old mask of charm. He winked at the cameras as they clicked. Some predators don't know when the hunt is over. The prosecution. Agent Ruiz laid out the case with the precision of a surgeon. Financial records, forged power of attorney papers, testimonies from 4 widows across 3 states, all telling the same story of a charming man who appeared out of nowhere, then disappeared with everything. And then Piper. The courtroom leaned forward as she took the stand, voice shaking but audible. "Yes," she admitted. "I gave Adrian information. I told him when Maeve went to bed what medications she took, what accounts she had. I thought he loved me." "Why did you continue?" the prosecutor pressed. Tears welled in her eyes. "Because he promised me a future. Because I wanted to matter to someone, and because I was stupid enough to believe him." The jury scribbled notes. The defense. When it was Adrian's turn, he rose like he was delivering a TED talk instead of standing trial. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice smooth as honey, "this is all a misunderstanding. Yes, I dated these women. Yes, I helped them with finances. But theft, fraud, that's a fantasy Maeve Ellison invented to cover her own bitterness. She was humiliated at the altar and decided to punish me." He spread his arms wide as if inviting applause. "Is it a crime to love again, to move on, to want companionship?" I wanted to laugh, but the bile rose too fast. The cross-examination. The prosecutor slid a stack of papers onto the bench. "Mr. Cross, can you explain why your signature appears on withdrawal slips from a Cayman account tied to Mrs. Ellison's funds?" Adrian faltered, just for a second. "And can you explain this message?" She read aloud, her voice slicing the silence. 2 more weeks and we're home free. The old woman trusts me completely." The jury's eyes snapped to him, his smile cracked. Maeve's testimony. Finally, it was my turn. I walked to the stand in my best navy suit, lavender pin glinting on my lapel. My voice didn't shake. "I loved once before. My husband, Robert, he built me a garden, not a prison. He gave me trust, not conditions. Adrian Cross is no Robert. He is a predator, and predators don't get second chances." The gallery murmured. The judge banged her gavel for order. The verdict. After 3 hours of deliberation, the jury filed back in. "On all counts, wire fraud, conspiracy, identity theft, we find the defendant guilty." The air left my lungs like I'd been holding it for months. Adrian's mask dropped completely, rage flashing as marshals cuffed him. Judge Harrison's voice was clear, merciless. "Mr. Cross, you systematically exploited vulnerable women. You will serve 25 years in federal prison without parole." The gavel cracked like thunder. Adrian sagged. The wolf had been caged. Maeve's reflection. As the courtroom emptied, Piper passed me, eyes downcast. She whispered, "Thank you for forcing me to tell the truth." I didn't answer. She hadn't done it for me. She'd done it to save herself. But justice had been served all the same. That night I walked through the lavender garden under the stars, inhaling its quiet strength. Robert once told me, "The strongest steel is forged in fire." I hadn't just survived the fire. I'd walked out wielding the sword. When the gavel struck and Adrian was led away in cuffs, something inside me shifted. For months, I had been living in defense, shielding myself, exposing him, surviving. But as I walked out of that courthouse, cameras flashing, microphones thrust toward me, I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was leading. The first step. That evening, Patricia and I sat in my kitchen, lavender tea steaming between us. "You did it," she said softly. "He's gone for good." "No," I corrected. "We did it, and he was just one wolf. There are others." She nodded slowly. "So, what now?" I looked down at my phone. 50 unread messages from women across the country. Some begging for advice. Others sharing their own near misses. "What now?" I said. "Is that we stop being victims. We become an army." The network evolves. Within weeks, the Aegis Widows network swelled from a handful of women in my living room to hundreds across state lines. We held meetings in church basements, public libraries, even diners after hours. Women brought photos of their boyfriends, emails full of promises, text threads dripping with red flags. Together, we dissected them like crime scenes. Together, we saved each other. And soon the stories shifted. Less, he took everything, and more, I caught him before he could. That was transformation, pain into protection, public recognition. The media storm hadn't died, it had evolved. CBS ran a feature. From Bride to Guardian, how one woman's betrayal sparked a movement. The FBI invited me to speak at a conference on elder fraud. Even Congress called, asking if I'd testify at a hearing about financial exploitation of seniors. The lavender widow from a quiet garden had become a name on Capitol Hill, Maeve's inner shift. But the real transformation wasn't on television. It was in my own skin. For years after Robert's death, I'd felt hollow, diminished, like half a person wandering through empty rooms. Adrian thought he'd found a weak, lonely widow. Instead, he had forged a fighter. When I looked in the mirror now, I didn't see someone defined by what had been taken. I saw someone defined by what she had chosen to build. Theo's words. One evening, Theo came by, hands shoved in his pockets, eyes tired but clear. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he said simply. "You turned the worst day of your life into something bigger than yourself." I smiled, touched his cheek. "Your father would have wanted me to keep fighting." Theo's eyes glistened. "You already won, Mom, not just against Adrian, against who you were before him." The transformation defined. He was right. This wasn't about a man anymore, not the husband I lost, not the con artist I exposed. It was about women like me who'd been told they were fragile, naive, easy prey. We weren't prey anymore. We were shields. We were swords. We were the fire forged into steel. At first, we were just a circle of chairs in my living room. 6 women, 1 pot of coffee, and stories that cracked our voices. But by the following spring, the circle had grown too large to fit under my roof. From living room to lecture halls. We booked a church hall in Savannah. Expecting maybe 30 attendees, we found nearly 200 women waiting. Some clutched folders of text messages, others carried nothing but shame in their eyes. I walked onto the stage, lavender pin gleaming on my blazer, and said the words I wished someone had told me years ago. "You are not foolish. You are not weak. You were targeted because of your strength, your trust, your hope, your heart. That is what predators exploit. But today you take it back." The applause was thunderous. From there, the floodgates opened. Invitations poured in from Atlanta, Denver, Phoenix, Boston. We weren't a support group anymore. We were a movement. Law Enforcement Alliance. The FBI noticed. Agent Ruiz called me personally. "Mrs. Ellison, your network is intercepting scams before we even get wind of them. How would you feel about formal cooperation?" Within months, Aegis Widows had a direct hotline to federal investigators. Our members submitted suspicious profiles, flagged bank transfers, even lured scammers into traps. In one case, a 72-year-old member posed as bait, recording a scammer's pitch and handing the evidence straight to agents. He was arrested within days. The first conference. The following year, we hosted our own national conference in Chicago, Aegis Rising. 3,000 women. Panels with prosecutors, cybercrime experts, and survivors sharing their stories. Workshops teaching financial literacy, online safety, and most importantly, the power of saying no. Standing at that podium, looking out over a sea of determined faces, I realized this was bigger than Adrian, bigger than me. It was a revolution in lace and steel, public recognition. Headlines followed us now, but they had shifted in tone. No longer just widow exposes scammer. Now it was. Grassroots movement saves millions from predators. Aegis widows, from victims to vanguard. How a wedding scandal sparked a national shield. The White House invited me to a round table on elder protection. Congress debated legislation nicknamed the Ellison Act, designed to stiffen penalties for romance fraud. When the president shook my hand and said, "Your fight is saving lives," I thought of Robert and I smiled. Maeve's reflection. I'd once believed my twilight years would be quiet, gardening, reading, fading into the background. But expansion had taught me something. Purpose doesn't retire. Every time a woman called to say, "I caught him before he took a dime," I felt the lavender bloom again in my chest. Adrian had tried to make me a victim. Instead, he made me a general, and the army was only growing. The lavender garden was in full bloom the day I finally let go. 2 years had passed since the altar confrontation, 1 year since Adrian's sentencing, and months since Aegis widows had grown into a national shield. But my own heart, it still carried echoes. Robert's laughter in the garden, Adrian's lies whispered in the dark, Piper's tears the night she begged for forgiveness, all ghosts crowding the corners of my life, a letter never sent. I sat at my desk one morning, pen in hand, and wrote a letter to Robert. "My love, you told me once that steel is forged in fire. I didn't know you meant me. I survived the fire. I walked through it, and I came out carrying a sword. I wish you could see me now, not just as your widow, but as a warrior in my own right." I folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope, and tucked it between the lavender stalks in our garden, a private grave for the past. The Piper visit. Weeks later, Piper requested a meeting. Theo refused to see her, but I agreed. She looked thinner, softer, prison time written in the lines around her eyes. "I'm working with a victims group," she said quietly, "trying to undo the damage I caused. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm not the same woman I was." I studied her face. For the first time, I saw not manipulation, not performance, just exhaustion, maybe even truth. "I forgave you long ago," I told her. "Not for your sake, for mine. Hate is too heavy a burden to carry." She nodded, tears brimming. "Thank you." That was the last time we spoke, and it was enough. A new beginning. On the anniversary of my wedding that wasn't, the Aegis Widows Network gathered in Savannah. Hundreds of women, candles in hand, each one a flame against the dark. I stood before them, lavender pinned to my lapel. 2 years ago, I thought my life was over, I told them. But endings are just disguised beginnings. Adrian didn't destroy me, he forged me. And together we've turned pain into purpose. That is closure, not silence, not forgetting, but transforming. The candles flickered, the room glowed, and for the first time in decades I felt whole. Maeve's final reflection. That night I walked barefoot through my lavender garden, moonlight silvering the blooms. I whispered into the quiet air. "Robert, I'm ready to live again, on my own terms, with my own strength. And if love comes, it will be true or not at all." The wind stirred the lavender. No ghosts answered, no lies lingered, just peace. For the first time in years, I slept without dreams. And when I woke, I knew this chapter was closed. 2 years after the day I tore my own wedding apart, I stood at a podium in Washington, D.C. Behind me, a banner read, "National Summit on Romance Fraud Prevention." In front of me sat senators, FBI directors, social workers, and hundreds of women whose stories mirrored mine. I adjusted the lavender pin on my blazer, the same pin I wore in court, the same one at our first Aegis meeting, and smiled. "When predators underestimate women," I said, voice carrying across the hall, "they make their greatest mistake. They think we are prey. But what they forget is this: prey can become predators, too, of the truth, of justice, of silence itself. We are not victims, we are guardians. The applause rose like thunder. The numbers. In just 2 years, the Aegis Widows Network had grown to over 3,000 members in 23 states. We had intercepted more than 250 scams, saved over $2, $5 million in retirement funds, and partnered with law enforcement to take down 3 major fraud rings. But the real victory wasn't in numbers. It was in the woman from Ohio who called me to say, "I trusted my instincts and walked away." It was in the 75-year-old in Texas who told me, "You gave me back my dignity." Each voice was a candle lit from the flame of that ruined wedding. Theo's healing. Theo came with me to D.C., standing tall in the audience. He'd rebuilt himself after Piper, brick by brick. After the summit, he hugged me, whispering, "You turned the worst day of your life into the best thing that ever happened to thousands of women." I smiled, tears pricking my eyes. "Your father would be proud of us both." Maeve's peace. That night, I walked along the Potomac, the city lights glittering on the water. For the first time in years, I didn't feel haunted. Not by Robert's absence, not by Adrian's betrayal, not even by Piper's weakness. I felt free. I felt strong. I felt me. I wasn't looking for love anymore. If it came, it would be honest, equal, earned. But if it didn't, that was fine too, because I had found something greater than love. I had found purpose. Final reflection. Some fairy tales end with happily ever after. Mine didn't. Mine ended with something better. And she lived powerfully ever after, protecting others, guarding truth, and proving that no widow, no woman is ever as alone as the wolves hope she is. The lavender garden would always bloom, and so would I.